Good morning.
Morning.
Nice to see everyone. Nice big hall of people. Some new faces. I can't see your whole face, but I can see part of it. So that's nice. Thank you all for wearing masks who are here in the hall to help protect each other. I found that it's hard to chant. The breathing in, I think I need maybe the paper one for breathing in. The breathing out's not so hard. The breathing in is kind of difficult. And I hope everybody who's joining us virtually or online, that you are also putting out a robust sound there in front of your computer. I know that can be a little challenging, but if you put it out there, just put it out there. Just, like when you're listening to a singer, and like some singers are very, very controlled and it's beautiful, but then you listen to the singer where their whole heart is in their voice. And then it's a little different. So that's a good way to chant. My teacher, when I was studying with him in northern Japan and first chanting, he would always say, chant as loud as you can, chant as loud as you can. So I was chanting, and I didn't only ever chanted with him. And then I went some other places and they weren't chanting so loud. And they said, boy, Ejo, you chant very loud. Always very kind. Like that's Japanese way of saying maybe you should quiet down a little bit. It is quite a joy to be together in this time, which is becoming increasingly more complex thing to say each week. I started this particular series of talks on the freedom of vigor, vigor being one of the 6 paramitas, or one of the 6 facets of the path that is central to Mahayana Buddhism in particular. And these 6 practices, or 6 ways of thinking about practice, or thinking about a path of liberation, a path of transformation, that each of these 6 hold a very important facet of what it is that we are attempting to do in waking up. And Virya, or vigor, I wanted to speak about among the realities of COVID-19 and coronavirus, realizing that we're in this for the long haul. I mean, we're always in it for the long haul, but we're in it for a particular kind of long haul. And so first talking about kshanti, or patience, or forbearance, and then talking about virya, or vigor. That was my aim. And this morning, as I was preparing my comments for today, or my talk for today, teaching for today, I became aware that the first talk that I gave on Virya was September 24th, the day before the murder of George Floyd. And suddenly I felt like, what could I say? This practice of forbearance in the face of the coronavirus, the practice of zeal in the face of the coronavirus, I felt like I could speak to very directly. And in a way, racial oppression, the same medicine can be applied. The dharma as a medicine, that's what we say in Buddhism, that the Buddhist teachings are a medicine. They're not just like an abstract truth. They're not something that is just like the revelation of how it is a medicine to help us transform, to help us live in a different way, to help us conceive in a different way, to help us care for each other in a different way, each other in the broadest possible terms. And so in a way, I thought, well, why are you hesitating, Ejo? Just say what you have to say. It's the dharma, it's medicine. But speaking of the path of liberation, from my position as a white man particularly, a person of certain kind of power, certain kind of position. Buddha Temple is not the biggest institution in the world. In fact, it counts as one of the smallest, I think. I mean, if it rises to the level of institution, I think we do, but we're just squeaking in there. But spiritual authority, a position of a trusted position, an expectation that I will be heard, a platform in which I speak on a regular basis. How can I speak of liberation? Who am I speaking to? What am I really speaking about? Does it hold true to the breadth of the Buddha's promise that all beings are completely endowed with the nature of awakening? Completely endowed. That all of us have the fullness, are the fullness of the awakened mind. Am I speaking to that? When we talk about the path of awakening, the path of awakening ones, or the path of the awakened ones, we say the Buddha way, or the way of the Bodhisattva, beings who endeavor, the Bodhisattvas are beings who endeavor to be liberated along with all other beings. Buddhas are beings which have completely achieved that liberation. But as I wrote the word liberation for self and other, and I thought about freedom, I just wanted to weep. I know so well what it means to feel the weight of my own feet on the ground. And to live with the gravity of my being. And how a great responsibility emerges from a willingness to feel that weight of my position. It's very immediate. When you sit in meditation, you feel what it is to be. The whole dynamic activity of being alive, which isn't just inside this bag of skin. It's this whole dynamic interaction. It's amazing. It calls a responsiveness out of us. How do I respond to the world, including myself? It's wonderful. But that isn't why I wanted to weep. That's kind of weeping with joy. This is a sorrow. You can come onto the Ingawa if you like. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Mario is starting to get rained on. So, yeah. A sense of freedom, a sense of self-determination, which comes so easily to me in my consciousness, in my sense of the world, which I preach from the seat again and again. Feel the vibrancy of your own being, right? And take a risk. The risk to be alive, the risk to encounter, the risk to meet yourself and to others. Right? I felt how karmically laden, how constructed my ability to feel that way or to speak that way is. By karmically laden, I mean something constructed through me. It doesn't mean that it is only about something that I started. but it means that there's something which moves through me, as me. And that's based in robbing others of that same sense of empowerment. Doesn't mean it's all that way, but it means there's something really true in my assertion of liberation, which is a little bit thin. You know, what is agency? This is central to the Buddhist teaching. Intention. How is it that I decide what to do? I decide how to think, decide how to act, decide how to be. The Buddha said that this is the center of our exploration. This is the center of our inquiry into suffering. That the way that our intention is, the way it's enacted, the way it's held, the way it's cultivated, this leads to the type of world that we live in. Right? Immediately as the way that we experience the world, it is created by the way that we intend. But the world over time is also created by the way that we intend. Things are constructed that have durability. The physical things are the least of the durable. The ideas, the prejudices, the contours of our collective being. These endure. And so when we speak of agency, the power of the self to decide and to act, when we talk about the liberation that is possible when we know about that, the preciousness of our own agency, the preciousness of our own intention. This is not an easy thing to discover. You might think, oh yeah, I decide stuff all the time. You know, I get strawberry ice cream or I get chocolate ice cream or whatever. You know, it's not so complicated, right? And we're very good at that. But when you sit down quietly for a bit and you go, whoa, what is this thing that is surging through me? I might call it thoughts, I might call it emotions, I might call it experience, but it's just all the time moving. And I thought it was me, I thought I decided stuff, and what you find out is there's this whole wellspring, which is not exactly you deciding, right? It's like this movement which is you. That's the intention that Buddhism is talking about. It's not control, right? It's this stream of consciousness, stream of living, a stream of being. It's not just in our head, not just in our feeling, it's our body. Right? It's moving all the time. To feel it deeply, to know it deeply, to realize it's frail, or frail is not the right word. It has delicacy, yeah. It's delicate in ways. I can't just grab it and make it do things. There's part of me that wants to do that, but it needs to be cared for. And there's a part of me that wants to say, no one can give that to you. And I believe that's true. No one can give it to you. You already have it. There's many parables of this within the Buddhist teaching. In the Lotus Sutra, one of the most famous parables is the man he's at his friend's house and they're having a party or whatever, and he's getting all drunk and he's not in good shape. And before he leaves, his friend sews a jewel into his robe because he's like, this guy, when he leaves here, who knows what's going to happen, but he can't stay here. I don't know if you've ever had friends like that. You're like, I don't know where you're going to go, but you can't stay here. You need to go somewhere. So my guess is this is how his friend is. He sews a jewel in his robe. He goes, okay. And he sends him off, and the guy, gets halfway home and falls asleep in the field somewhere or whatever, and he wakes up, and he totally forgets about the jewel that's in his robe. And so his life completely falls apart. He's completely destitute, and he's in the town one day, and he runs into his friend, and his friend sees him, and the guy's just total pauper, right? And he says, "What's going on?" And he said, "Wow, my life totally fell apart. I lost everything." And then he said, "Well, what about that gem? What about the jewel I sewed into your robe?" He says, "What are you talking about?" And he reaches over and he says, right here. And he feels in his robe, and they open it up, and I don't know. I imagine it to be like a big, multifaceted ruby, or maybe a nice emerald or something. I mean, it's a simple story, right? But it's one that's worth remembering. That gift has already been given. You have that. You have intention. It's there. It is your Buddha nature. And there's another part of me that wants to say no one can take it away. I want to say that. Maybe they can't take it away, but they can certainly cover it up. They can certainly make you believe that you don't have that agency. They can certainly control your life. I don't even know I should say they here. There is a world that can chew you up. And you almost completely forget about the freedom of that intention. The isolation that comes from disenfranchisement. Can make us believe that there's nothing we can do, or even anything that should be done or that we want to do. We just say, oh, this is the way the world is. Someone said to me a few days ago some particular hard thing that was happening, and they were kind of teasing me for being such an idealist, and I had to make a really hard choice about helping someone in a way that didn't look like help. It looked kind of cold. And they said, oh, looks like you're growing up. I felt like I wanted to say yes. I hope I'm growing kinder. I hope growing up means I'm growing kinder, that I know something more about kindness, that this difficult choice will hurt me. I don't want it to not hurt me, because it speaks to my incapacity, it speaks to our incapacity to respond to the suffering that's there. So I gladly take the pain. I need it. I need that karma to tell me about how it is that I can live more freely with others. I believe that there is a river of pain that moves through our bodies, our hearts, our minds, our spirits. The Buddha Shakyamuni pointed this out 2,500 years ago under certain circumstances, certain collection of causes and conditions that he lived under. And he couldn't be satisfied with all of the different things, all the solutions that were presented to him, that he found, that he looked for. He looked for different ways to take care of that river of pain. He looked to success. He looked to doing everything right, becoming the best. He looked at meditation and yoga, becoming the best, the most refined in his spirit and in his mind. He looked at crushing everything through asceticism, just abandoning the world completely. Not like abandoning the world to live in a cushy cabin on the outside of town, but like abandoning everything, including food and friends, bathing, reading, companionship. Right? He tried all those ways. And none of them essentially addressed that river of suffering, allowed him to know what the undoing of that river of suffering was. To speak very specifically about it, I know that river of pain through the body, heart, mind, and spirit as a white American. And that is completely conditioned. When I speak of liberation, how can I speak for people who are different than me, who have been on the oppressive side of the power dynamic? The racial power dynamic is what I'm particularly talking about in the history of this country. The reason I bring this up is because if we don't come to know that river of pain, if we don't uncover it, we just replicate the same thing again and again and again and again and again. I got to tell you, I have all kinds of good ideas about how we can solve this problem. That's my position as a person of power. To have all kinds of good ideas, right? But they're like, I get so sick of them, you know? I'm sure you get sick of them as much or more than I do, so I inflict them upon you. So, you know, here in the Dharma talk, it's my job to deliver some kind of a dharma. You know, it's not a discussion. We have those at the temple, well, not that much lately because of coronavirus, but there are other kinds of venues. But I want to remind you, you know, it's like me saying something to you, which is, you say that. I used to have this Tai Chi teacher who would come up really close to you and say, "Relax!" And you go like, it was hilarious. But so I sort of feel that way when I say, how are you? How are you? How are you in all of this? That matters completely. You feel confused, you feel enraged, you feel hopeless. You may feel hopeful. I don't know, there's a huge array just inside myself of thoughts and feelings, emotions about the state of the world today. And particularly about the murder of Black Americans. And so as I feel that, I want to say, what's a medicine here? What do I know of a medicine? And what I know of a medicine is that feeling is not your enemy. It's your teacher. That if we want to talk about vigor, we can't talk about just getting to a goal that we've decided is is the way things should be. I told this story last week of the story of one of the Buddha's previous lives in which he was a merchant and he was leading a group of merchants, and they ran into this kind of spirit ghost demon that comes from South Asia. This is rakshas is what they're called, but they're this kind of powerful being that is dancing. Oftentimes they're dancing with destruction. Right? They're problems, usually, not always. Sometimes they get bound to the dharma and they become agents of medicine. But usually they're making problems. But they're also, this is a thing I love about the Buddhist teachings, is they also show up in really important ways. They show up as teachers, right, in these stories. They're not just to be despised. Like the world wouldn't be better if we could get rid of them. Actually, we need them to tell us about how it is that we are. And so they meet this Rakshas, and so he's the leader of the merchants, and so he goes up and he says, "Ha, I know what I'll do with you. I'll hit you with my right hand," and it sticks to the demon. He hits it with his left hand, sticks to the demon. He kicks it with his right foot, sticks to the demon. Kicks it with his left foot, sticks to the demon. He's like, uh-oh. And then he says, "Ha," and he headbutts the demon. Head sticks to the demon, right? So there he is, all of his limbs, all 5 things. If you think of your legs as like your ability to move around, your arms and hands as ability to get things done, your head is the ability to think about things. He's totally enmeshed in the problem, right? But he keeps his vigor alive, right? He says, "I will still defeat you," right? And in this story, the Rakshasa says, "Oh, okay, I can see I'm not going to overcome you, so I'll let you go." He was inspired by his vigor, and so he let him go. I like that story. And I like it in a couple different ways. The way that you would just read it typically, I think, it's like you could make a cartoon of it. It would be cool, but there's another meaning inside of there. What does it mean for his mind to stay free, even though his spirit to stay free, even though his mind is caught up in the problem? His arms are caught up in the problem. His legs are caught up in the problem. Yeah? One way is to think he's like, "No, I won't give up on my goal. I'll keep going." And that's an important message. We should hear that. Goal should be liberation for everyone and everything. Hold it and just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Be dogged. Right? But there's another way to understand this, or another side of it, which isn't about that kind of like heroic push forward. It's like, I know this river. I couldn't give up if I wanted to, because I know this river. And the only way I know the river is to know myself, to regard my own being, my own feeling as relevant, my own perspective as relevant, but limited. This is very important. Relevant but limited. Limited to the particular causes and conditions from which I am seeing the situation. In a way, it's so challenging. But it's also invigorating. There's a whole world of perspectives, a whole world for you to hear. There's a whole aliveness which you're a part of. I'm so tired when I give in to the industrial mindset. The industrial mindset, or I might say the heart set, of life as an assembly line. Let's talk about efficiencies. Let's talk about effectiveness. Let's talk about getting things done in a particular way, making it work. When I used to work for the schools, when I was a school teacher, the bell would ring and I would just spit on the ground, try to remind myself that there was some other possibility, and then try to keep going. It's like we just drill it into ourselves. And part of what we drill into ourselves as we're living that is that there is this end product, and that someone has determined what it's supposed to be, and we're all going to live in a kind of relationship to what that end product is. There's no end to responsiveness. There's no end to aliveness. There's no end to responsibility. That's freedom. That's invigorating. You know? For those of you who are blessed to be parents, you know that when you see your children. You know? You say, I want to be responsive. That's what it means to be a parent. I don't want that to just end. I might not want it to stay in a certain phase forever. You know, sometimes you want the phase to move to another one. But it's a great joy of the journey of being a parent. Within Buddhism, within the teaching of vigor, we call this non-negligence. It's like the continuity of our vigor. It's not just the immediate feeling of the rush of energy. It's what I know to be true deep down in my gut. I apply myself to it, and I'm like, I couldn't give up even if I wanted to. To get in contact with that flow is to get in contact with the flow of sorrow in the world. Because when you know that, you can't turn away. In the Abrahamic faiths, the great prophets of those traditions, they knew this as lament. They knew this as the wailing, the collective grief of people. In Buddhism, we know it as the first noble truth, the noble truth of suffering. The vigor that comes from there is not a post. I mean that in the most modern way, like, you know. Although I also admit that, you know, could we be doing the kinds of things we are collectively without this technology? No way. I mean, maybe another way it would have come about, could be carried out. So I want to honor that, but also point you, don't stop there, right? Like, that's like, you know, punch the demon. Cool, guys, let's go do something else now, right? And your arm is still stuck to it. And you're just dragging it around with you. Right? It's not enough. It's not a matter of enough, right? Enough is that mindset that I'm going to be done with it, rather than I am responsible, I am responding, I am together with. Neither is it a position. I'd like to invite you to notice how quickly you are co-opted once you take a position. I was studying that this week, trying to stay connected with the Black Lives Matter movement and things that were going on around the country. And just again and again and again and again, liberal white Americans saying, oh, I really believe in this, but you know, this rioting is really worse than the problem. And I would just scream. I was like, what are you talking about, worse than? I mean, I have to meditate a little bit. I think of the surge of anger comes through me. You know, this idea, like that position, like rioting is wrong, right? I don't think it's great. Sort of seems not that unpredictable or outside of the stream of causes and conditions which we're all in, right? I'm not saying we should take the position to say it's righteous, but once we take the position to say it is not allowable or acceptable or it's terrible, and we just hold fast to that position, we can be co-opted immediately. And I don't mean co-opted like someone's going to invite us into a room and, you know, ask us to vote for this person or that person. I mean, they'll do that eventually. But your mind is co-opted immediately, right? Your mind is co-opted by not being responsive to the situation, but rather just working through your judgment of the situation. Happens in an instance. But at the same time, vigor is partisan. Vigor is partisan. What I mean by that is you will not get any traction if you don't care about something which is particular and embodied and real. It's a phenomena that you can touch with your body, with your heart, with your mind. Okay. Vigor is traction, where you say something must be done. A response is necessary. Right? So I'm using the word partisan here on purpose because so much of what happens, I would say particularly within Buddhist circles, Western Buddhist circles, is that we go to an abstraction of wholeness. That's wonderful, you know? But it doesn't do anything. It's not grounded. It doesn't make a decision. It doesn't take a stand. I'm not talking about a position that gets co-opted. I'm talking about not being a partisan of politics. I'm talking about a partisan of liberation, not as an idea, but as in the actual life of people who you live with. Right? That's the actuality I'm talking about. That's the partisanship I'm talking about. Stand with your sisters and your brothers. Stand with liberation. Stand with the possibility that the world is not just how it is. The world is how we make it. And we make it again and again and again and again and again. A particular tool that Buddhism offers us is we can study this on a moment-to-moment level. That's how fast you create the world. And you do it again and again. If you think that creation of your life is not racialized, you're wrong. It is. There's no way around it if you live in a racialized society. So we have a responsibility, right, to respond to that karma, which is inside of ourselves as well as in the world. And so I don't say that's the only thing that needs to be done, but sitting in a hall talking about Buddhist practice, talking about Buddha Dharma, would say this is a primary thing for people who are interested in this path to pay attention to. Don't hold it as separate. The phenomena of who you are is created and recreated moment after moment after moment after moment. You're not only responsible for it. What we're trying to do as followers of this path is to be responsive to it. You see the difference there? There's responsible for it. It's got to start there. You have to say like, yeah, I got to own this. But then there's something very liberating. You become responsive to it. How can I bring about a liberation? Because the suffering's running through you, no matter who you are. You are limited by the non-liberation, right, of any being. As they're held down, your heart is also contracted, no matter who you are. So, care. Maybe I should have just said that at the beginning. It's care. We'll meditate some more. And I think the thing with vigor here is don't be afraid to have a perspective, a position, and risk it. So I'll just end today, and we have some time for questions by I don't know if anybody saw this, one of these videos that went viral. I guess there's many of them now. It was three African-American men, and I believe they were in North Carolina. And there was one was 45 and one was 30, I think in his early 30s, and the other was 16. And it was at a protest. And the older gentleman, I think, had maybe been participating in some looting or was talking about looting. And the gentleman who was in his early 30s was trying to say, no, this isn't the way. This isn't the way. Don't do it like this. This just feeds into the issue. And they were just completely at it. And there's a 16-year-old young man who is there. And he didn't say a lot, but he became the third point in the triangle of these three men talking about the situation. And there have been lots of commentary about this in different ways that people, it goes viral because it's inspiring to people in some way, or it means something to people in some way. Okay, you could analyze that. Good sides, bad sides, everything. But the reason that I remembered it was I was so inspired by the way that all three were totally invested. We're totally invested in that moment. And that's what returns for me if I spend some time with the part of me that is grieving, that it feels like weeping is the appropriate response. That my commitment can't be abstract. Have any questions or comments or rebuttals?
Hey,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for your talk, but one thing I often consider is the nature of the human condition all over the world in history.
Yeah.
There's always an us and a them.
Yep.
Go to India, anywhere.
Yeah.
America, it's happening, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's part of the human condition.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I practice Buddhism, I believe it addresses that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing just to respond to that is I do believe it's the human condition that we create a self and other, and that great suffering emerges from that. What the Buddha presented to us is another possibility. And so no matter where we are, to find the tendrils of the way in which that objectification of other beings create suffering for them and for us. This is the core of Buddhist teachings. And so as we sit here today, we have to take that up in the concrete reality of the moment that we're in. The fact that it's happened all the time should only invite us into a more vigorous engagement with that reality. And we have a very particular set of causes and conditions. Although this is something that's happened in terms of the disempowerment and the oppression of people, it's happened for millennia. We have our own particular flavor, and we have to become very, very wise about that, the causes and conditions that we're part of. And actually, it's quite a joy to do that, even though it involves a lot of facing of pain. Hi.
Is there if I apply vigor in any given week, is there a difference in sitting zazen, training my 17-year-old obnoxious son to burn down the patriarchy and to recognize his white privilege, joining a peaceful protest, or blowing something up? Is there a difference in the vigor or the karma of that, or I'm looking for a practical plan for the week.
Yeah. So I will say two things about that. One is actually I'm just going to say one thing. I was listening to some talks given by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's the great sage, Buddhist sage of our age. Really remarkable. If anyone has not read any of his work, I highly encourage you. He was caught in the completely impossible situation of being in Vietnam as the French were kicked out, colonial powers, and then the American forces came to invade. And he refused to take sides. He and his group of monks refused to take sides with either the American forces or with the Ho Chi Minh's forces that were trying to build a communist state. And for that, his life was in great danger over time. And he ended up fleeing to France and now has a monastery there called Plum Village that many of you have probably heard about before. Anyway, if you listen to his talks or read his teachings, he's probably the most peaceful person that you'll ever, just by reading a few things he says, you can just feel it. And he was right in the middle of the fire. So I was like, I wonder what he has to say about this. So I went to listen to some of his talks this week. And someone asked him, should we try to change the system by protesting, by creating, political change, et cetera, et cetera. And he said something which I don't know how he meant it necessarily, but I just know what I heard. He said, I think it's best for us to work to be examples. And on the surface, you could see that as a denial of protest, right? He's saying, don't make all this fuss. You should try to make your life the best. Create a community that is the best possible type of community and let people see that. Let them be inspired by that. And I see that to be true. How do we become an example? How do we make our own life the most just, the most open, right? The most responsive, the most responsible, which it turns out is also the most free, right? But he also didn't say, you could interpret it that way, but he didn't say, no, don't protest, do this. And so the way that I heard it was, what does it mean to be an example? What does it mean to rise to my highest self? To me, that's the question. And that's not going to be the same for every person. In fact, what a joy that it is not the same for every person. And what a joy it is that some people will rise to that occasion in a different way than I will. And what a joy that oftentimes I won't agree with them. And what a joy that I have to take off the carapace of my hardened heart to meet them. What a joy that I'm invited into giving up self-clinging again and again and again and again. It's like, I can't escape it. And so that's a way I would encourage you, is what does it mean to rise to your best self? With the qualification that the best self means that you have to meet other beings and to trust that they are rising and that you meet them. They might not always be rising to their best selves, I'm not saying that, but that you rise to meet them with your best self. And that will require you to relinquish your clinging. And that may mean protest, that may mean a certain kind of teaching, it may mean meditation. It can mean a lot of different things. A place where I am right now is I'm blessed to have 3 beautiful daughters, and I was talking with the 2 older ones over this past week, and I love James Baldwin, right? So I'm always like, you guys got to read James Baldwin. You got to read James Baldwin. And they're finally Dad, we don't understand him. They're well-educated. They're 28, 23. And they're just I tried to read A Case for Reparations, and one of my daughters said, but I just don't understand. I just don't understand what he's saying. And they're super well-educated, but there's a kind of way that language is used. And James Baldwin definitely has it, and I think Ta-Nehisi Coates does too, in which if you're not used to it or you don't know how to get into it, it's just And after all these years where I've been kind of come on, you gotta. I finally saw it. I was like, oh, my brain's like that. That's why I love it, right? But they're just no, I don't get it. I need some other thing. And so we're talking about that. And so that was my job this week, which I have not fulfilled yet, is to find, what I was doing is I was reading, I have this great collection, I'm sorry to go on and on, but I have this great collection of essays by James Baldwin that I love, that I've read many, many times. So I was rereading that, and I was like, I gotta find the one that they'll just be able to identify with. Because I don't want it to be oh, you don't get this, so here's something else. I want to try to lead them into that world a little bit, or to invite them. In a way, up until now, I've just been kind of insisting. I think I found the one. It's from The Beginning of a Fire Next Time,
or he writes The Fire next time, I believe. He writes a letter to his nephew. It's quite inspiring. Anyway, that's what I have. Let's maybe one more, two more. Anybody online? Okay, I'll say one last thing then if there's nobody coming on, because someone asked me a question this week which I said I would answer in my talk, and then I promptly forgot about until just now. And that is, what's the connection between vigor and generosity? And I think I've already answered the question, but I'll just frame it through those terms. So generosity is the first of the 6 perfections. It is the starting place for everything else. That's where it starts. That's where the path can be really alive. It has to go through the gateway of generosity, right? A direct ask for us to give up our self-clinging and to share. And that's what I'm talking about here with vigor. To know your own being, to be willing to accept your own limits, your own limitations, the own limitation of your perspective, the own limitation of your being, but not to see that as a deficit, but to see that as an invitation to share. You see? It's an invitation to share. But if you're going to share, the only way you can really share is to be vulnerable. You got to give it up. You got to give up the self-clinging to be able to share. Because sharing doesn't mean just you give. Generosity is not just about giving. That's you can kind of be up here and sort of throw things down there and try to stay isolated. It's not really a true generosity, but it's pretty removed, right? But what I'm saying here, generosity as sharing, you have to be willing to receive. And so you show up in your limited way, willing to be vulnerable with that, to make a mistake, to not know what to do, but to be honest and truthful and forward and kind. And you'll get feedback. And sometimes the feedback will be rough. And sometimes the feedback will be wonderful, but will always be a teaching if you can hear it that way. And in that, we all are uplifted. So generosity, yeah, maybe all these can just go back to generosity.